The U.S. debt ceiling is basically a self-imposed limit on the national credit card. Think of it as the government setting a max limit on how much it can borrow to pay its bills. This cap is decided by law and, ironically, keeps getting bumped up to cover the government's spending habits. And how is that so-called self-control going? Roughly over 30 trillion under control. Here's the deal. The U.S. debt ceiling is like a recurring financial drama. It's significant because, well, if Uncle Sam hits this ceiling and can't borrow more, it might just cause a mini apocalypse in the economy and financial markets. The Treasury's hands are tied. No more issuing Treasury bills or bonds. It's like reaching the limit on your credit card, but on a colossal national scale. And while this doesn't mean the U.S. stops having debt or bills, because let's be real, those never stop, it does mean the government can't borrow more cash to pay for all the stuff it already committed to. Now, this isn't just about money. Oh no, it's about power too. Who gets to spend? Who decides the limit? It's a whole power play. And this, my friends, is where the fun begins. Why does the U.S. keep raising its borrowing limit? Let's hop into our time machine and go back to 1917. That's when the U.S. Congress, probably in a rare moment of financial prudence, decided to set this debt ceiling with the Second Liberty Bond Act. Before then, Congress was more like, sure, Treasury, issue whatever debt you need, buddy. But then World War I happened, and they thought, maybe we need some boundaries here. So they set limits on different types of debt like bonds and bills. A couple of decades later, in 1939, Congress decided it was time for a change. They set a limit on the total debt across all instruments. It's like they finally got a financial advisor who told them, guys, maybe don't spend all your money on shiny things. This act basically consolidated most of the federal borrowing under one big umbrella, the U.S. Treasury. Now, the only small apocalyptic detail is that Congress loves to change the ceiling. It's like a never-ending game of limbo. How low can you go, but in reverse? From 1942 to 1945, they kept raising it for World War II expenses. Then they lowered it a bit in 1946 because, the war was over. But then they just kept adjusting it over the years, mostly upwards because, surprise, surprise, governments spend a lot. In the 1970s, things got a bit more dramatic. There was this thing called the Gephardt Rule in 1979 where they decided, hey, if we pass a budget, let's just assume the debt ceiling is raised. It's like giving somebody a blank check and then acting surprised when they use it. But plot twist, they ditched this rule in 1995. Since then, it's been a disaster. How large can this debt ceiling grow? The debt ceiling was raised a bunch of times, especially under presidents like Reagan, Clinton, and George W. Bush. It's almost like a tradition at this point. Let's not forget the epic sagas of 1995, 2011, and 2021. In 1995, a debate over the ceiling size caused a government shutdown. Then, in 2011, Republicans used it as a bargaining chip for deficit reduction, which led to a stock market plunge. And in 2021, after some political tug-of-war, the ceiling was raised to a whopping $31.4 trillion. It's like watching a high-stakes poker game where they keep raising the bets with no end in sight. The U.S. debt ceiling isn't just a boring financial concept. It's a battlefield where government branches show off their muscles. Ever since Congress created this ceiling in 1917, it's been like a game of tug-of-war between lawmakers and the president. Every time the government needs to borrow more, which, let's be honest, is pretty often, it sparks a heated debate. Some lawmakers use it as an excuse to push for spending cuts, while others see it as a necessary evil to keep the government running. The Treasury Department, playing the role of the responsible adult, has to manage this mess. They reached their $31.4 trillion borrowing limit in 2023, and after some good old-fashioned political drama, Congress decided to suspend the ceiling until 2025. All this while the U.S. government has been running a deficit of nearly $1 trillion every year since 2001. Talk about living beyond your means, right? Now, let's not forget the global aspect of this. When the U.S. plays chicken with its debt ceiling, it's not just a domestic issue. A U.S. default, a scenario where Uncle Sam says, sorry, can't pay the debts, could be catastrophic globally. It's like dropping a bomb in the world's financial markets. Even the thought of it makes economists and financial bigwigs sweat bullets. If the U.S. defaulted, it could lead to a downgrade in credit ratings, increased borrowing costs, and a possible global recession. Is this the last wind? The U.S. global markets are like a house of cards, and the debt ceiling is a gust of wind waiting to happen. Over the past 7 decades, the debt ceiling has been raised 78 times. But in 2011, when Congress played hardball and delayed raising it, the U.S. lost its AAA credit rating. This led to higher borrowing costs, which is like getting a worse interest rate on your credit card because you missed a payment. If the U.S. defaults, it's not just Uncle Sam who feels the heat. It could mean delayed salaries for public sector workers, including teachers, and potentially millions of job losses. A serious default could send the GDP tumbling by 6% and result in the loss of millions of jobs, almost like reliving the 2008 financial crisis 10 times worse. And the global economy? It's like a game of dominoes, where the last chip is always us. A U.S. default could shake the world's financial system to its core, leading to a deep global recession, a decline in the U.S. dollar, and chaos in the exchange rates. Imagine oil prices spiking and inflation rising again. But this time, panic would not only be felt on YouTube, it will be felt in a devastating way in our pockets. The debt ceiling could unleash a crisis like we've never seen before. I mean $31.4 trillion bad. Let's zoom in on a couple of real nail-biters. The 2011 and 2013 debt ceiling crisis. These weren't just any old political squabbles. They were full-blown economic roller coasters. In 2011, it was like watching a high-stakes game of chicken. The newly Republican-controlled House wanted President Obama to cut the deficit as a condition for raising the ceiling. This standoff was a new twist in the debt ceiling saga, which had usually been drama-free. If the U.S. had hit its debt ceiling, we were looking at a possible default or cutting off funds for various programs. Just 2 days before D-Day, the Republicans blinked, agreeing to raise the ceiling with a side of future spending cuts. But the damage was done. The stock market had its most volatile week since 2008, and the U.S. credit rating took a hit for the first time ever. 2013 hits and it's deja vu all over again. This time, Republicans were adamant about spending cuts, even threatening to defund Obamacare. The deadlock led to a government shutdown and budget sequestration. The crisis finally ended in October with a temporary fix, but not before causing some serious stress in the financial markets and leading to a reevaluation of the U.S. credit rating. Who's truly to blame? The last financial crisis exposed just how fragile the U.S. economy can be, especially when politics get in the way. The debt ceiling debates highlight a precarious balance between economic stability and political power plays. It's like a high-wire act where the safety net is public confidence, which political showdowns and media hype can shake. The public's perception of these events is critical, and the media plays a massive role in shaping this narrative. The whole situation is like a pressure cooker, where one wrong move could blow the lid off the economy. Looking ahead, there's a lot of debate about rethinking this whole debt ceiling thing. Some experts, especially economists, think it's time to either revamp or ditch it entirely. Internationally, most countries don't have a debt ceiling, so maybe it's time the U.S. reconsiders this approach. Besides, I don't know about you, but when you raise your national debt ceiling 78 times, where the fuck is the ceiling anyway? As for future negotiations, expect more of the same high drama and brinkmanship, with each round potentially impacting the economy and the balance of power. It's like a recurring bad dream, where the same plot plays out over and over, with slight variations but always the same underlying tension. Now, it's clear that the U.S. debt ceiling is more than just a boring financial term. It's a power struggle dressed in a suit. The ceiling is a constant reminder of the delicate balance between power and finance. As for the future, expect more of the same. Political showdowns, market anxieties, maybe a dash of chaos. It's a cycle that shows no signs of stopping. And where there was a 78, there will definitely be a 79. When will the U.S. hit its money ceiling? Or is there no limit? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.